It's time to talk about pre-release, in particular OP-07 pre-release. In today's video, we're going to go over everything you need to know about the upcoming pre-release events, and then some tips and tricks, pointers, things that will help you perform at your best when it comes to the pre-release event. OP-07 pre-release starts as early as the 21st of June, and applications open up the 7th of June. So make sure you get your TCG Bandai app downloaded, mark that date, save it so that you can get in and don't miss out on your chance to win a pre-release stamped Captain Kid. That is the prize that we're all playing for when it comes to our pre-release event. Previously, these pre-release winning cards have been quite popular, so it's your chance to win one. Now, quickly, if you haven't been to a pre-release event before, this is your first one that you're going to, let's quickly go over how they work. So basically, your local game store will run a pre-release event in one of two ways. The first is kind of the boring way. The first is just a constructed event where you bring your EB1 meta decks and you play it out, and the winner takes home the pre-release stamped winner card. The second and the more exciting way, which hopefully your store runs it this way, is by a sealed event. Basically how that works is part of your entry to the tournament, you'll get 6 packs, you'll open up those packs and you'll make a 40 card deck out of those cards. Now, there are some slight variations in deck building rules, so there's no color restriction, so you can run any color in your deck, and there's no card limit in your decks as well. So you can run 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 40 of the same card. That is no problem. The only time that your color rules still apply is if you are using a card effect that states search for a black card or search for a red card. Those color rules will still apply to your cards. Jumping into our first category, we're going to talk about leaders. Now, in front of me and kind of behind my face here as well, we've got some leaders that have been proven to be quite successful when it comes to your pre-release events. In particular, your Zoro, your Katakuri, and your starter deck Captain Kid. These three are just great to run in pre-release events. Why? Because their effects are very generic. So Zoro, Don times 1, give everything plus 1000 power. Your Katakuri, you're attaching a Don, being able to swing 7k at your leader, plus you'll be able to look at your life, your opponent's life, so you can get an idea of what's coming. And then Captain Kid, just because you can get 2 swings in with Captain Kid. So Starter Deck Crocodile is another fairly good one. It's been good in the last couple of pre-release events just because of its effect. Is a Don -4, you can bounce a 5 cost or lower character back to hand. And this comes into play in this current pre-release meta as well. A lot of cards are 5 cost or less, so Croc can be a fairly good option there. There's a few cards in there as well that take advantage of you being at lower Don, so depending on how many you pull, you may want to run Croc. And we'll also introduce to a new big bad kind of option for your pre-release events in the last pre-release, which was the Yamato leader. Just that double attack is always kind of scary to deal with. Probably not going to be super effective just because we have a lot more blockers available to us in this pre-release compared to last pre-release where Yamato could just run wild, but still an option if you want to run it. Now, if we take a quick look at the new leaders coming out of OP-07, so if you do want to run some of them, you can possibly run some of them. The only ones I'd say you want to go for is your Monkey D Dragon and your Jewelry Bonnie. So let's just take a look at them. So taking a look at Dragon, here's activate main once per turn, give up to a total 2 of your currently attached Don to one of your characters. So a great way just to manipulate Don. So it is an okay option. I'd still say your Katakuri, Zoro, or your Captain Kid would be better options than this. But if you want to run a new one, go for it. Bonnie is the other new one that's probably worthwhile running if you do want to run a new one. So the effect for Bonnie is when attacking once per turn, you can rest the Don and rest one of your opponent's leaders or characters. So that can be quite nice. There are a few cards and characters to help you restand Don that we have available to us out of the OP-07 pool, so we can take effect of Bonnie's ability right there. Now we're going to turn our attention to some key cards you probably do want to include when you're building your deck for your pre-release event. So we're going to go over 2k counters, blockers, and then key cards, including events and characters, and then we're going to talk about some filler cards if you find you still have some space. Let's turn our attention to the 2k counters to begin with. In front of me, we've got them all that are available to us in the OP-07 pool, and usually at this point, I would say just kind of max out on the 2k counters that you find. In this set, we may run into a problem where we may have too many, because if a few of them, 5 of these are common, so we might see multiple of them, but you at least want to run for anywhere between 4 to 8. More you can go for it, but you definitely want to cover yourself in that amount there. So general rule is just kind of max out on your 2k counters. Most of the 2k counters that we have available to us don't really have a lot of good effects, so they're going to be mainly just used as a 2k counter. Some ones that do have some usable effects starting with Crocodile. We'll have a look here at Crocodile. So Crocodiles are uncommon, so you may or may not see this in the cards that you pull, but it's a 4 cost 5000 body, and the effect is on play, rest 1 Don, return up to one 2 cost or lower character to the owner's hand. So there are a few blockers, which we'll talk about in the next section, that you can bounce back with the Crocodile, and there are a few other kind of key cards that you like to use their effects that you can bounce back and reuse. So Crocodile's not a bad option. There's not a lot of blockers that are 2 cost or less in the pool, and there's not a lot of those cards that can get you some good effects that are 2 cost or less, but it is an option. Edison is another 2k counter that has a fairly decent effect, cost you 4 or 5,000 body on play. If you have 2 or less life cards, you draw 2 and then trash 2. So just a great way to kind of filter your hand, find the pieces that you need, maybe find blockers or extra counters or characters that you need to help you close out the game. We'll take a quick look at Frankie. Frankie's not a bad one. Frankie, like on play effect, there's nothing. He's just kind of vanilla, but his trigger is you can draw a card, which is nice. And then if you have 1 or less life, you can play the card. So that kind of stuff doesn't always kind of come up. If you play Katakuri, you can kind of maybe manipulate that a little bit more. Frankie is super rare. I'm not exactly sure. There's 2 different options for me here, but either way, if you're going to find one, you're probably only going to find one, so that trigger effect may or may not come up, but it's just good to know about. Now Sanji is a great one. It is a super rare, so once again, if you're going to find one, it's only going to be one, but is a 2k counter, is also a blocker as well, and is a big body, 6 cost, 6,000 power, but his cost can become 3 if you have less Don than your opponent, specifically 2 or more less than your opponent. So if you're running Crocodile, this is a great option to get a nice cheap blocker out. A quick little note on Hattori. This 2k counter, there is a Rob Lucci in the pool that can be quite good to play as a character. So Hattori can give that character a nice buff there as well. And for some reason, if you want to be real spicy and run the Rob Lucci, the black one, let restand when something's KO'd, you definitely can do that. But I'd say Captain Kid's still a better leader than the Lucci. All right, jumping over to the blockers that we have available to us. This is all of them here. Now we were talking about those 2 cost or less. As you can see, there's 2 in the Chopper and the Jizu Munda. The rest are kind of bigger than that there as well. Now for the blockers, there's only 2 common blockers and 4 uncommon blockers. The rest are rare or high. So there is a chance you may get very little blockers going on there, and if that's the case, Yamato is actually probably a pretty good leader to pick. Now some of these blockers actually do have some really cool effects. We'll go over the kind of the key ones there. First of all, looking at Chopper, just a way to ramp a Don if you have less Don than your opponent on play. So if you're running Crocodile as your leader, great one to run there. Your Karina on plays, you can minus something by 2,000 power for the turn, so great way to have a blocker and then reduce something you can swing into with your other characters you have on board. There aren't really too many viable or good or actually any kind of removal effects in the OP-07 card pool, so it's mainly just going to be used into swinging into things. Your Margaret is a great one on play, draw a card, who doesn't love that. Your Tanaka-san is good just because it's a trigger that can be played out, so a blocker that can be played out for free. Your Baccarat's not a bad one there at all. On your opponent's attack once per turn, you may trash a card from your hand and then give one of your leaders or characters 2,000 power for the battle. So just another way to get some counter going on. Turn those dead cards in hand into something useful right there. Caribou, if you have 6 or more Don rested, this character gains 1,000 power, so becomes a 6,000 blocker. At the same time, you can also be aggressive with it when it's your turn. You have that amount of Don rested. U-Rogue's a really good one, so end of your turn you can set one of your Don active. Works well if you want to run Bonnie, works well for some of your events, which we'll talk about later as well. Your Ace on play, you're going to draw 2 and then you're going to return 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck in any order. So just great way to kind of fix your hand, filter, find those pieces. The Sanji down here we've already spoken about, and then let's talk about the Hawkins. The Hawkins is only a blocker if you're going to run the Bonnie or the Captain Kid as your leader. And the effect is basically like the Rationale character. If this character would be removed from the board in any way, shape or form. In Hawkins' case, you just rest one of your opponent's characters instead. Now for your blockers, I'd say you want to try and run anywhere between 4 to 8 blockers. That's usually pretty good. And if you know you're going to be facing a lot of Yamatos in your pre-release, try lean more towards that 8 so you can see the blockers, you can protect yourself from those double swings. Now, let's have a look at some key events, some in particular counter events that you probably do want to run if you see them. And first of all, let's talk about some of the better ones here. Starting off with Slow Beam Sword. Costing you 2, it's a counter you Don -1, and then one of your characters or leaders gains 2,000 power for the battle. Then you can rest one of your opponent's characters, which is, yeah, pretty good when your opponent has a wide board. It's resting anything. It's not something with a certain cost or a certain power. You are resting anything, which is really good. And the trigger's not too bad. You can set one of your Don as active, so it gives you options to use some of your other events in your hand. This one is common as well, so you're most likely going to see it, so chuck it in that deck. Iron Body is another really good one, cost you 2. The counter effect is you can give something 4,000 power for the battle, and then if you have 10 or more cards in your trash, it gains another 2,000. Wild, 6,000 counter for 2 cost. Now 10 cards in trash might be a little bit harder to achieve in a pre-release event, but great option to have. The trigger is you give something 1000 power for the turn, and it's also a common, so you're probably going to see it, maybe even multiples of it. Slave Arrow is not a bad one at all. Cost you 1. Counter, you return one character with a cost of 2 or less to your hand, then you give something 4000 power for the battle. So this card should always be live. 2 cost or higher is everything pretty much that you're going to run. There's one card, there's a 1 cost that you're going to run. Otherwise, you're always going to have an option to activate this. The trigger is also going to draw 2 and then place 2 cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. So those 3 are probably the better ones. We'll quickly look at all the other ones here. First of all, we've got Flame Spit, cost you 1. It's a main or counter, which is really nice. You can give one of your leaders or characters 1000 power for the turn. So it's not just for a battle, it's for a turn, which is nice. After this, if your opponent has 2 or less life, you can rest one of their characters with a cost of 4 or less. So great either way with a main or a counter. The trigger is rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. Please Save Me is another one. Counter, if you have 2 or less life, give something 3000 power during the turn, so really good late game. 1 cost 3000, always nice, good value there. The trigger you're not really going to use, you're not going to really run egg specific cards a lot. There are a few that you'll probably want to run in the key characters, which we'll talk about in a moment, but most of the time it's just going to be used as the counter. Karma Exposure, another 1 cost one that gives something 2000 power for the battle. Then if you have 3 or more characters on board, that then becomes 3000 instead of 2000. The trigger is you can KO one of your opponent's 4 cost or lower characters that are rested. The old slow beam here, 1 cost, Dom -1, give something -2000 power for the turn. So just a reverse way of buffing something by 2000, but it's for the turn, which is nice. So sometimes if you're running into an opponent that is running Captain Kidd as a leader, you can just -2000 power so they don't get another big swing coming in at you. The last counter that we will look at here is a 2 cost Snake Dance. Give something plus 4000 power during the battle, then return up to one of your characters to your hand. So that is a maze, not a requirement like the other one. So 2 cost 4000, actually fairly decent. Probably should include it in those 4 that are pretty good. So a 4k buff for 2, and then possibly bouncing something back to your hand. The trigger is you can return something back to your hand from your side of the field and then bounce back one of your opponent's 5 cost lower characters to their hand. Now let's talk about vanillas. Vanillas are really good when it comes to pre-release events just because they're cheap bodies that are big and there's not a lot of removal. There's some resting stuff and bouncing back stuff available to us in this pool of cards, but not a lot of removal. So these guys are usually good, great value. And these guys are all commons as well. So max out on them probably, unless you find you're needing to use the other cards that we've spoken about and we will talk about. But yeah, these guys, definitely max out on them. Use them as your space fillers as well if you need. You get your Tunjit, which is a 1 cost 3000 body, only 1 cost thing you're going to be running. So if you do get to go first, try to see this in your hand. So you have a character out straight away. Your dice 4 cost 6000, Jinbei 4 cost 6000, and your Vega Force 1 is a 4 cost 6000. And you got your 2 6 cost 8000 bodies in your Maha and your Scratchman Pooh. Now we're moving on to some of the other key cards that are available to us. There's mostly characters. We've got 1 event in this list here, but these are the guys that have some decent effects that you probably do want to run. First of all, let's talk about Morgans. 2 cost, 2000 power, 1000 counter. On play, your opponent discards 1 card from their hand and then reveals their hand. Then your opponent draws a card. So you get to know what's going on. Super valuable card. Great one. Run as many as you can find. Edward Weevil is the next one on this list. 4 cost, 5000 body, 1000 counter. Don ×1 when attacking. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck, then place them in any order on the top or the bottom of your deck. So just you figuring out what's coming up next. You like a great reorder to what you need. Don't like him, bottom deck him. Fuza's not a bad one. 4 cost, 6000 body, no counter for this one. Don ×1 when attacking. If you have 1 or less life cards, KO one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 3 or less. So you're hitting a fair few cards there. More so in the blocker kind of realm. So that's where this card will kind of be more valuable. Julie Bonnie's the first secret rare we're running to in this list. 5 cost, 6000 body, 1000 counter. On play, up to one of your opponent's rested characters or dons cannot become active at the next refresh phase. So that's really good for you. You can slow down your opponent's curve a bit there or stop them from having extra attack or extra aggression next turn. So really good if you're running into something like Yamato with double attack or Captain Kidd that can restand and swing again. Fisher Tiger is the next one on our list. 5 cost, 6000 body, 1000 counter. This character can attack your opponents the turn that's played. So kind of semi-rush. Good for board clearing. The on play you not really use, that is a very archetype specific effect, which you won't be using, but it's used for that first effect there. Monkey D. Luffy's okay one. It was borderline being on this list of 5 cost, 6000 body, 1000 counter. If you have 3 or more characters, your 3 cost lower characters other than Luffy cannot be KO'd by your opponent's effects. There's not a lot of KOing effects going on here. There's a few triggers and stuff that can do it. There's a few cards that are on play that can do it. but for the most part, those little guys are going to be safe. But if you need to fill a spot, great one to run in there. Luchi's up next. 5 costs, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter on play. Return 3 cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck. Your opponent discards 1 card from a hand, then your opponent places 1 card from their trash into the bottom of the deck. So just a great way to control your opponent's hand size, especially towards the late game. And then if you have that Hattori that you pulled and you want to buff this Luchi, great one to do that. Atlas is another 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter. The effect is if your life is lower than your opponent's, it just can't be KO'd in battle. Really handy. Jinbei again, another 5 cost, 6,000 body with 1,000 counter. Mainly going to be run there because of this trigger. The trigger is you can bounce a full cost lower of your opponent's cards back to their hand, and then you add Jinbei to your hand. Next up is Luffy, a super rare. Is one of our rare forms of removal that are available to us. 5 cost, 6,000 body, 1,000 counter. Activate main, place this character in the trash, and if you have 2 or less life, KO one of your opponent's characters with the cost of 4 or less, and then draw a card. The trigger is you can KO something with the cost of 4 or less. So 2 ways you can get a good KOing off Luffy. We've spoken about Hawkins already, so we won't go over Hawkins, but just another option there if you don't run a Supernova as a leader for the blocker effect. Just a hard, sticky body. Next, we're running Boa Hancock. 6 cost, 8,000 power, no counter. On play, up to one of your opponent's characters other than Luffy can't attack until the end of the next turn. Really valuable. And then you can bottom deck a 1 cost or lower character. That second part of the effect, not really going to come up too much. We've got that 1 vanilla, it's a 1 cost. Otherwise, nothing really is happening there. But the on play is great. Stunning something is really good. We got our boy Fro Luffy up next. 6 cost, 7,000 body, no counter. Activate main once per turn, -3 Don. If your opponent has 3 or more characters in play, you can restand Luffy. That restand option is absolutely fantastic. Another 6 cost, 7,000 body in Lucy. When attacking once per turn, you may put the top or bottom card of your life into your hand. Rest one of your opponent's characters to the cost of 4 or less. Then if your life total is 1 or less, place the top card of your deck into the top of your life. So a fancy, real fancy, hard way to draw a card, but you also get a nice resting ability off there. And can be quite good late game if you just need to rest a blocker and swing in, even though you won't be able to get the recovery of that life there. Ain is another one with similar stats there, but the on plays you can set one of your opponent's characters to his hero power. Just a great way to be able to clear board, control board. Allows you to get your little weenie guys to swing into the character that you've reduced. Dragon is another great one here. 8 cost, 9,000 body. So one of your kind of your boss monsters, if you see it, is a super rare. So would be hard luck finding one, but it has rush, which is really insane for pre-release events. And the on play, you can give your leader or one of your opponent's characters up to 2 rested Don. So you can attach the Don onto him. You can swing 11,000 rush, which is insane, or 13,000 if you use the 2 remaining Don to attach onto him. Mihawk, another big boy, 8 cost, 10,000 body, on play, draw a card. Who doesn't like that? Both the secret rares are pretty good in the set. The first one here is Sabo, 8 cost, 9,000 body, on play, trash a card from your hand. Then KO something with a cost of 5 or less and something with a cost of 3 or less. So another KO option, but it's secret rare, going to be hard to find. Sassy, another form of removal, super rare, also going to be hard to find. 9 cost, 9,000 body, on play. Place one of your characters in the trash, KO anything wild. And Ace is the other secret rare in the set. 10 cost, 10,000 body, on play, recover one, and then he has rush. Absolutely wild. And the last card on this list, cards probably to include if you see it, is the event with a novel for a name. We'll just call it Demon 9 Flash. 2 cost, activate main up to one of your leaders or characters, gains 3,000 power during the turn. During the turn's good because things like Kid, multiple swings, things like the Luffy character, multiple swings. Then you may rest one of your 3 cost or greater characters. If you did, rest one of your opponent's characters at the cost of 5 or less. So double swinging stuff can be insane with those characters we spoke about, those leaders that we spoke about, plus resting something. Yeah, card's really good. Run it. The trick is you can rest something with a cost of 4 or less. Now, the last page that we have here, if you're struggling to fill stuff, if your vanillas aren't filling things, if you haven't filled with your 2 gate counters, other things like that, these guys are options you can run. First up, Zoro, another 1 cost character with 2,000 power, 1,000 counter. When attacking, if you have 3 more characters in play, gains 2,000 power. Outlook 3, 2 cost character, no power, 1,000 counter. Activate main, places card in trash, give 2 of your opponent's characters minus 2,000 for the turn. Help you with some board control. Robin, 3 cost, 4,000 body, 1,000 counter. Just the trigger is not going to be used because you're not going to run an air kick leader, but it's good stat line if you do need it. Speaking of good stat lines, Porsche is the one with good stat line. 3 cost, 5,000 body, no counter. The on play is a Dom -1. And look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Add 1 card with Foxy Pirates to your hand. Place the remaining bottom of your deck in any order. Then you may play up to 1 4,000 power lower purple character from your hand. Next we have Blue Jam, 4 cost, 5,000 body, 1,000 counter, Don times 1 when attacking. KO one of your opponent's characters with 2,000 power or less, so there's a KO option there. Could be bumped up into the other list of includes if you see a lot of your power reduction cards. And finally, we got Dragon's Breath, a 2 cost event, activate main, KO one of your opponent's characters with 3,000 power or less. Can be more effective if you see that power reduction characters. And then you get to KO a 1 cost stage, which that's not going to happen. So those are cards you do want to include in your builds when it comes to your events. Now we are going to talk about a way you can practice your deck builds and then playing with those decks. We're jumping over here to OP-TCG.GG. These guys usually have a pack simulator, as you can see, it's right in front of me here. They just don't have one up for OP-07. They got 3 to 6. I've reached out to them to see if they are going to be doing one for OP-07. I'll leave a pinned comment when I get an update from them. But basically how this works is, this is what you'd open from 6 packs right here. So if we're playing OP-06 pre-release, you do that, you re-roll right there, you can pull them all up here again. So you can kind of get an idea of what cards you want to pull out from those things we've spoken about. And then you can copy it to your clipboard, and then you can play some private matches against your friends on the sim with this there. I know previously there were some issues not being able to run a 50 card deck in the private mode, but I understand that should be resolved now. You should be able to do that. If it isn't, let me know in the comment section down below. But if that doesn't end up working with the play testing, you'll at least get a way to be able to practice your deck building. And that does it for our pre-release event tips. So if you guys got anything else you want to add down in the comment section below, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, stay beautiful, and we'll see you all in the next one.